Good afternoon. Hopefully everybody got a chance to eat. Today I want to talk to you about how to use information to sell better. So I take it, just real quick show of hands, you sell for a living, you're in the sales position. Figures, everybody wants to make money is here, everyone else is eating lunch. So when I was a little kid, my mom always told me, and as I'm sure yours did too, don't talk to strangers. There's obviously an obvious reason for that is that if somebody was coming up to a 4-year-old and trying to talk to them and you didn't know them, chances are the person trying to talk to you did not have your best interests at heart. They probably had an ulterior motive and one that was probably not really in your best interest. And 40 some odd years later, what my mom told me is still true, because every day, and I'm sure you get these same emails, we are approached by strangers with emails like this. Hi, Tom. Now I've blurred out his name and company to protect the idiotic. I came across your LinkedIn profile, because we all get this email. I thought you might be interested in lead generation and appointment setting services for business development. Here's how a company can help me. We bring telemarketing and email marketing solutions that are fine-tuned and yada, 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 yada. Now, what makes this email so particularly humorous to me is that with a simple Google search of my name, you would find this, the book I wrote a couple of years ago. And if you would flip the back cover, you would see, I hate cold calling, stop doing it. I built my agency without a single cold call, competitive pitch presentation. I basically wouldn't ever use a telemarketing service or an outbound email service. But that's modern selling. The traditional approach of sales, if you think about it, is really built on testosterone. It's built on competition. It actually places you and your prospective buyer in a competition. Because as salespeople, we've always been taught that it's our job to cause an event to occur, make the sale, close the deal, prospect for the new lead. We've always been taught that it's our job to cause the other individual to do something we want them to do. And it's a numbers game. We just blindly shoot for anybody that'll go, because at the end of the day, for us, in the traditional world, sales is a transaction. We don't really care who we're selling to, just as long as we sell, so we hit our quarterly numbers, so we get our annual bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. And so to that salesperson who was on the other end of that email, and to most salespeople, you and I look like this. We're just nameless, faceless prospects that were handed to us in a database, and the goal is to win, to beat us, sometimes into submission with some of the email programs that I see quite often nowadays. I actually just had one this morning. The title was, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Because it was like the 11th email in 17 days this guy had sent me and had every possible come-on version. I didn't have the heart to say, yes, you should go, like quickly. The faster, the better. But this is what we look like. We're just nameless, faceless people. But what I would like to talk to you about today is a different way of selling. In fact, it's not even selling. It's seduction. And when you think about sales as seduction, you realize that it's very, very different. My job in a seduction approach isn't to beat you, doesn't place me in competition with you. In fact, if I do my job correctly, I manipulate you into believing that you actually made a voluntary decision on your own to buy whatever it is I'm selling. It's seduction. But you can't seduce a stranger. Talk to any mentalist in the magician's world, which is basically seduction. You think you're doing something, but a mentalist will tell you that they have somehow cued you to do it. Seduction is about taking information that we know about people, finding the buttons, and then leading them down a pathway. And yes, we often think of it, and even if you look it up in the internet, it's always linked to physical seduction, sex. But seduction of the mind and of the emotion is really what sales should be about. Because selling and closing a deal shouldn't be the end, it should be the beginning. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Seduction's based on knowledge. I cannot win your mind and your heart if I don't know anything about you, because then I don't know what buttons to push. I don't know what to touch on. And social media and digital marketing today gives us a treasure trove of information. It allows us to see into people's lives because for most of us, social media has become sort of a back channel to our lives. And what I will tell you is that most people in the world, maybe the people in this room might be an outlier, most people in the world really don't understand security settings on social media platforms. I will tell you that honestly, I think, and if you're a millennial, forgive me, most millennials, I'm convinced, think that Twitter is private. Because if you could see the stuff we find on Twitter when we're doing profiles for clients, and I just can't imagine a world where you would put that in a public domain. So I'm convinced that they think it's private. But that's fine. What people don't understand is what you can use to help you seduce them or to make them think they want to do something. The problem is that social media data is unstructured. There's no simple way to do this. There's no HubSpot for social listening that'll just do everything for you. You need a properly trained analyst, you need a couple of different tools, and you need some analytical protocols. But with that, if you put that in place, you can take that unstructured data and you can turn it into really deep, compelling insights. You can turn it into knowledge so that yes, you may be a stranger to me in so much as we've never had a physical conversation. When I first reach out to you, be it in a social space, a physical space, over the phone, doesn't matter. You are not a stranger to me. I know a lot about you, and it's going to give me a platform on which I can have a conversation that you're going to start to feel very comfortable with me before I ever get on to anything to do with selling you my product. By harnessing the data, what you can do is you can actually figure out pretty much everything there is to know. I can know where you live, where you work, what you eat, clothes you buy, what you watch on TV, your favorite music, etc. So let me show you what an actual profile can look like and talk a little bit about how you can use it. So we do a lot of work in the liquor space. I know it probably surprises you to hear a guy who likes stiff drinks works for liquor clients. But we do a lot of work, but our liquor clients are kind of atypical. Unlike most liquor brands, they're not really ad-driven. Their marketing looks a lot more like B2B than B2C. They realize that the bartender is the gateway to the consumer. But traditionally, when their sales force was reaching out to bartenders, they were doing it the way the guy in the email did in the very beginning. Didn't know anything about them, basically walked in selling from day one. We said, well, let's twist that. Let's try a seduction methodology, and let us help prepare your salespeople to seduce the bartender. Let us show you what we can show you about a bartender using publicly available data. Everything you're going to see here is public. I didn't hire a Russian hacker to break into the guy's email or his Snapchat or any of that. It's all public. But look at the level of detail that people will put out there for you to find. So this is a bartender in New Orleans. I have shielded his identity just because I think that's only right. He's a student at the University of New Orleans where he studies biology. He graduated East Jefferson High School, which is outside of New Orleans. He's currently 22. He was born April 6th. He's an organ donor. Nice guy. He currently lives in New Orleans. He's middle class. His family is very middle class. He played baseball in high school. He was a rather bad pitcher with a 5.63 ERA. And as the father of a high school pitcher, I can tell you that's really horrible if you're not a baseball fan. But he's a Red Sox fan, so go Boston. He would have loved to have been here last night. He's a huge Red Sox fan. He also likes football. His favorite players are Walter Payton, Jack Youngblood, and Ronnie Lott. He also plays flag football on the weekends. His parents are still married. He could possibly have a girlfriend. Her name is Sarah. He has a 21-year-old brother, a sister who's in her 20s. He's really much more of a ladies' man. If you look at his following, it tends to be lots of females versus males, many of which are in the service industry, which makes him doubly important for our client because not only can he influence the customer at his bar, he can influence other bartenders and servers. He's a big music fan, Souls of Mischief, Q-Tip, David Bowie, obviously that's from his youth, Equilibrium, Big L, Maz Def, the Black Keys, not big into television. He's into tattoos. He's a huge dog lover, so his passed away in March of 2014. He's a very fashionable dresser, which is interesting. It's a new phase for him. A couple of years ago in his feed, it was very much hoodies and T-shirts. But in the last couple of years, he's become much more fashionable, very maybe even hipster would be the word you would use. But for him, his fashion accessory is his tie and his watch. Very much about his ties and his watches. He's an artist. He's an outstanding pen and pencil drawing. He was in a car crash. If you're going to take him for lunch, you want to go to sushi, Chinese pizza, or the ever-present Taco Bell. He's into muscle cars, hiking, outdoors, fishing. He's an MMA fan. Interestingly, though, he's into Aristotle, Plato, Buddha. So there's this whole sort of Zen side to his personality. He's into astronomy. Alcoholically, he's into bourbon, Crown, vodka. He likes Blue Moon. Social media-wise, all major platforms, including MySpace, Instagram, mostly professionally. He shows his drinks. He shows his craft. Twitter is his more personal, and Facebook is where he gets very personal. Now, the interesting thing about this young man is when we showed this to our client as a demo piece, there was a young man in the audience who was one of their salespeople. And we picked this guy for a specific reason, because we knew that the guy in the audience knew him. They were friends. And so when I was done, I asked the guy in the audience, how did we do? How close did we get? And can I tell you how hard he was laughing? He was like, oh my God, you nailed him. If he knew that you all could find all this, oh my God. He said, yeah, I will tell you this, Sarah's not his girlfriend, but in your defense, all of us thought she was his girlfriend too. So I can't fault you guys for, stalking him and thinking the same thing. So the question becomes, how do you use this kind of information? Well, as we told them, we said, well, listen, this is the way you use this. And again, this is how you go from making a cold call to a warm call. We said, imagine, for instance, that he's working one night at the bar and his bar has a television. If you're going to schedule a time to go into the bar to meet him, to try to begin to build a relationship, I don't know, maybe pick a night when Major League Baseball is on. I don't know, maybe the Red Sox are playing. And when you sit down at the bar and order your drink, if it's not on the baseball game, ask him, would you mind, there's a baseball game on, could you turn the TV to that? It's going to be the Red Sox. You're going to be able to ask him, hey, baseball fan, do you like ball? Yeah, you know he likes ball. You already got the thing. You already know he likes Boston. So you go, yeah, who's your favorite team? Boston. Oh, wow, yeah. How about you? Oh, I like the Yanks or whatever, whoever you like. Then you can go on and take the conversation further. Did you, so you like baseball? Did you play baseball? Yeah, I played in high school. What position were you? Onward. By using the knowledge, you could easily build out a 20-minute call or a meeting script with this guy. And at the end of the time, again, you've not sold him anything. You're just trying to build a relationship. You're trying to turn a stranger into a friend before you start to sell. You've had a great conversation. And when you leave, he's going to think that was a great conversationalist. Because you know what the hallmark of a great conversationalist is? They don't talk very much. They ask you questions. They let you talk about your absolute, most beloved, favorite topic in the world. You. And you leave thinking, wow, that was a great conversation. That was awesome. Because somebody showed genuine interest in you. You're laying the groundwork with this kind of data to let you and your salespeople build relationships first and then convert those relationships to sales. This is seduction. This is making friends with someone and then building a trust level and then bringing them slowly down the pipe. It scales more slowly. Of course it will. You're not going to email 10,000 people. But through seduction and through social reconnaissance and arming your salespeople to go with a seductive style, what you effectively do is make all of your salespeople more effective. When they introduced me, they said, I've been doing this for like over 20 years. For most of that time, I was the new business guy at the ad agency. I was the guy that did the pitching. I cold called on the prospects. I cold emailed. On average, we would close 25% of the gigs that we got a chance at. And we were doing pretty good. Most people in the industry felt like that was a good close rate. When I started my company 5 years ago, I started with a seduction model. In 5 years, I've not made a cold call. I haven't run an ad. I haven't done any of the things I did in the first 15. Interestingly enough, the close rate went from 25 to about 85%. 85% of the clients we get in front of, we win. And 95% of the time, if we lose, it's because we're too expensive. That's a hell of a jump, folks. And I don't have to cold call anybody, which as a guy who hates to cold call, is pretty nice. The point being is that because we invest in the relationship and the knowledge up front, we're able to be so much more effective during the sales and nurturing process. We're much more trusted. It allows us to close faster. That's the beauty of this. That's the beauty of why you don't want to talk to a stranger. Now let me tell you 7 other real big benefits of using a recon approach to selling. Number one, as I said, it gives you the insights, it gives you the conversation starters. Number two, really important here, it gives you common ground, shared passions. Maybe you're a Boston Red Sox fan too. Well, that's going to make it even easier to talk to that guy as you're sitting at the bar because you're going to know the players, you're going to know the stats, etc. And I think one of the most powerful uses is it makes networking easier for introverts. There's a belief in our world that salespeople have to be the type A, go-getters, outgoing, can talk to a wall if they had to. It really places introvert-type folks at a disadvantage. But actually, if you can arm an introvert with this kind of information, they feel infinitely more comfortable going up to someone in a conference, at a bar, wherever, and talking to that person. It makes them a lot more comfortable and makes it a lot easier, frankly, to begin the relationship in social platforms, places like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So it really opens you up to bringing an entirely different person into your sales prospecting, sales force, sales nurturing cycle that you might otherwise set aside. It actually allows you to build relationships faster, even though it limits your ability to build lots of relationships. Obviously, this is a slower process. You've got to do your homework first. It's really built on building a relationship with an individual. You're not going to email 500 or 1,000 people. You're going to email 10. But you're going to connect with those 10 people. You're going to build a relationship so much faster. And because you've built the relationship faster and built it more strongly, when you go to start to make the sale, your conversion number will go up because, let's face it, we all like to do business with people we like. We don't like to do business with strangers. It really can allow you to define a lot of pain points. Now, obviously, in that individual example right there, we didn't show you any of the pain points. I mean, he's a bartender. His pain points are you don't tip. But it allows you in a B2B environment, especially, you can begin to define and understand pain points. Because we all know, we all do it. We don't like something. One of the very first things we'll do is turn into social media and we'll vent it off. We'll tweet it, we'll put it up on Facebook, whatever. We'll talk trash about whatever company has under-delivered to our performance expectations. So it allows you to very quickly and very easily define that, tap into it, and build a solution set for it. Now, the thing is you have to be careful, because I see this all the time, and somebody pops off about they're unhappy with the Wi-Fi at a conference, and some bozo jumps in with, oh, we sell great Wi-Fi services. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is building that portfolio, building that profile and understanding, and then being smart enough to work that into the conversation at the right time to nurture that. It also helps you to define the best channels that aren't phone and email. Mr. Cutler, my friend, was just standing up for a moment ago, and we were talking about cold call, and he said somebody's quote, when's the best time to call me? Email. It is. For a lot of people, they don't want to be called. I mean, does anybody here not screen your calls at home or at work? Of course not. I mean, for fun at my house, we let the 7-year-old answer the phone when we don't recognize the phone number. It's great fun. Telemarketers love him. And at the office, I mean, let's face it, the best thing about having a Google Voice number is you can send it to voicemail and listen. It's amazing how many times you get the hang-up click. And then the next day, the same phone number rings up in your Google line, and you send it to voicemail, and you get the hang-up. You know what it is. It's a salesperson calling you because you're a stranger. This will help you figure out the better channels. It will help you figure out, hey, I can get him on email, or I can get him on social media. One of the things you can do when you build profiles is you can actually profile the usage patterns. Does someone tend to be on Twitter at the same time of day? Do they tend to be active on LinkedIn at a certain time of the day? Use that information to time your sales process better. If I see that you're pretty much always on Twitter between 12 and 1, I'm pretty sure you're eating lunch, not working, and you're kind of killing your time as you're on Twitter. Probably not a bad time to try to call you or email you, or hey, maybe even reach out to you via Twitter and start a conversation if I can see what you're doing because I already know something about you. So it can really help you time your outreach at a time where I'm more susceptible or more likely to even listen to somebody or enter into a conversation with somebody that I don't already know, as a person and in the physical world. And lastly, you never make a cold call. You never call on somebody that you don't know. You never call on that faceless mannequin. You always call on a person, you know something about them, you have a plethora of conversational topics that you can enter into with them. And so, it's kind of, I don't know if you went and saw Dave Delaney a little while ago, he was talking about using improv. And it's kind of like improv. You've got all this information. And so as the call or the conversation pivots, you're able to pivot with it because you know so much. Now, don't do as one of my clients did and basically told the person that she had this profile on them and that she knew everything there was to know about him from his social media feeds, because that will just freak the bejesus out of them, and they will hang up on you very quickly. But work that conversationally into what you're trying to do. Steer the conversation place. Ask questions that you already know the answers to keep the conversation moving until you can get it to a place where you can start to enter into an actual sales. The other great purpose of this is that it allows you to establish the propinquity points, and this is where really the social selling comes in. Propinquity is a real word. It's the science of relationships. Scientists over the last 100 years have been doing lots of research in how relationships form, what are the causal variables, what are the predictor variables. And the number one predictor variable is proximity, either physical or psychological. Okay, so is anybody in here married to somebody that they worked with at some time? It's okay, I am. You can raise your hand. We're in the corporate pond together. I got it. So all of us who just had our hands up, we are benefactors of what they call industrial propinquity, which is an incredibly romantic term to describe the statistical fact that men and women who work close together in a high proximity, there is an over-indexing of people that end up getting married that come out of that. Okay, so the closer you can be. So when you're doing this, you can begin to understand where is your prospect living. For any prospect you're going to call on, there are social media sites that they participate in. Could be Twitter chats, could be LinkedIn groups, could be Facebook groups, whatever. There are people that you may know. LinkedIn is great for that, establishing joint connections. There are increasingly digital domains. Maybe they're going to a HubSpot blog or someone else's blog and they're leaving comments and they're reading. They are surfacing in places that you can find them. And then you can begin to use those to understand where you and your content should be. For instance, if you were to notice that a bunch of your prospects all attend HubSpot conference, the inbound conference over the past few years, guess what conference ought to maybe be on your trade show conference list this year? Because you know that they're there, and most likely other people that are like them will be there. So you use this to establish not only where they are, but then you can plan your touches. So it's easy when I talk to you about a bartender. He bartends. I go to his bar, I can meet him. It's easy. It's much more difficult to do when you're trying to find somebody in the professional services world, the professional world in general. You're not just going to drop by their office every day or call them every day. That's not going to work. But if you can establish their propinquity points, where are they online in any level of consistency, you can then appear in those same places. And in those places, you can do the exact same thing. Just as you ask the bartender to put the ball game on the TV, you can engage with somebody on a site, on the comment stream of a blog post, or in a Twitter chat, or in a LinkedIn group, and you can begin to lead them down a pathway because, again, you already know the questions to ask. You know the conversational topics to jump into, which might be professional, might be personal. Let me show you it in a way that might be slightly more applicable so that when you walk out of here, you have some ideas. So this is actually someone here at Inbound. They might even be in this room. Everybody's wondering, dear God, is it me? Okay, so he lives in Louisville. He's about 42. I have his birth date, but I didn't want to share that. He has a wife and 2 kids. Graduated with a journalism degree from Moorhead, did a master's at WVU. He has a brother who's married to a lovely lady by the name of Kyla. He's Catholic, huge Pirates baseball fan. He likes cats and bourbon. I'm not sure what that says about him. Into live music. His biggest, I think, the thing that I find most interesting, he really wishes he had a motorcycle. I'm guessing the wife doesn't allow that. Favors t-shirts at all times, and he's a complete and utter smartass. Where can you find him online? He writes on his own blog. He does a lot of guest posting at Entrepreneur and Forbes. Mostly will tend to comment on Schaefer Marketing Solutions. That's Mark Schaefer's Grow blog. He loves him some Chris Brogan. and he's there a lot as well. He will also comment in the Atlantic, Adweek, and Ad Contrarian. Anybody want to venture a guess as to who it is? No one? I knew somebody would get it. Mr. Jason Falls, who was just speaking next door a few minutes ago. Now, it's okay. Falls told me I could do this. He actually saw the slide before I put it up. And I took out all the really embarrassing stuff. But if you want that, we can talk afterwards. So if you were trying to sell something to Jason Falls, okay, maybe you're a startup in the technology space. Maybe you got a blog that you want him to retweet because you want 10,000 people to see it. Maybe you've got a charity thing, whatever. For whatever reason, you want a relationship with Jason Falls, the Jason Falls, and you want that to benefit you. You now know a little bit about Jason. Here's how you would use that to start to build a relationship. First off, you know where he writes. So not only can you do the normal stuff like reading posts and commenting, because let's face it, if you're a blogger and somebody comments on your post, especially nowadays because it seems like that doesn't happen as much, you notice the people that are doing it. You start to see who they are. You can use his bio as a call to action. I had a gentleman years ago, I wrote a piece for Ad Age, and I kid you not, he called the agency that I was employed at, got through, and he said, I read your article on the airplane last night from Ad Age, and I just had to call you. And it just so seems that it hit a nerve with him and so forth. And today, he and I are very good friends. We have a lot of mutual assistance that we do for one another. And you know what he did? He cold called. But it wasn't really a cold call because the first words out of his mouth were, I really loved your article in Ad Age. I had to call you. Now, who amongst you could have that relayed to you on a phone and not have your ego about yay big for the next 30 seconds? Right? I own the world for 30 seconds. And he took that opportunity to sink the hook. And then we had a nice conversation. And now, years later, we've actually become good friends. It's so easy. When people put themselves out there, if you can get the data, find out where they are, and then have half a brain, it's pretty easy to start to seduce people. You could share his posts, but more importantly, what you could do is you could begin to recon his posts. Pay attention to who else is commenting on his posts. Because what you're then doing is by paying attention and tracking that, you're beginning to build out his social profile, not just who follows him on Twitter or who he follows or who's friends with or whatever. You're mapping out the people who likely he has real conversations with in real life. Who are his friends? Who influences him? Who does he influence? And that can be very, very important when you're trying to develop a relationship, because a guy like Jason's pretty popular. He's pretty well known. You may not be able to get through his front door, but then if you can start to understand who his close friends are, who are his advisors, who can you make friends with that then could introduce you to Jason? You can ladder up to him. But if you're not paying attention, if you're not building the profile, you'll never know. Second thing, you can take what he likes. Instead of just sending a cold email, you can send an email that has something personalized in it. Now, I think you need to be careful with this. We were talking the other night with some folks, and they were talking about how somebody had sent them an email and said, hey, I saw you posted about such and such on Facebook. And then they kind of went into like some totally tangential sales pitch. And their response was, that's kind of odd. This person is not a friend of mine, so it didn't make any sense that they would even comment on what I put on Facebook. But if you can take it and use it intelligently, during the College World Series, I had received an email, and the PS was simply, hey, good luck to the Longhorns in the College World Series. Okay. They at least took the time to figure out where I went to college, and that I had some of, I followed baseball, and I have some affinity for baseball. It's a little thing, but that little thing meant the difference between me just hitting delete and at least taking the time to read the email and politely say, yeah, this is not a good time. That's not something I need to buy. Didn't close the door. Just said it's not really open right now. So that person has the opportunity to come back and build a relationship later. Why? Because they took 5 minutes, they probably looked at my LinkedIn profile. Really simple. My personal favorite use of this kind of stalking is right here, conferences. Conferences create an abundance of opportunities for you to just strike up a conversation with anyone else in the building at any time. By knowing things about people, by knowing things about Jason, you can find him, stalk him here in the building, and find a convenient time to just so happen to be right next to him. Now, I will tell you, because I know Jason personally, that usually involves a bar. I promise you, if you find a bar, he will be near. And I mean that in the most loving way, because I'll probably be standing next to him. But the idea is that you can walk up, and again, you're creating what appears to be a chance encounter when in fact it's not. It's very planned. And you already know the kind of things you want to talk about. You already know the things that you can use to start conversation. Again, if there's a TV and there's a baseball game, hey, you a baseball fan? It's an innocent, innocuous question. You know he's a baseball fan. He's going to talk about it. You might be buying a drink and say, hey, let me buy you a drink. Yeah, what do you drink? I'm getting a bourbon. You already know he drinks bourbon. You might even know what kind. It allows you to begin that conversation, ease into it in a way that's totally comfortable. And even for a person who hates networking or a totally shy or totally introverted person, it gives you the opportunity to break the ice in a way that's comfortable for both you and Jason. Again, because you took the time to get to know him. You did the time to do the research before you just went and just barged up to him and like 4,000 other people, hey, how you doing, blah, 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 I sell this, we're this startup, we really would love you to take a look at us, blog about us, here's my card. I watched that happen at a conference yesterday at least 12 times to a buddy of mine that works at LinkedIn. And every single time I watched his eyes just kind of glaze over, take the card, be very, very nice, put it in his pocket, and I promise you it'll never get looked at again. But if a person had come up to him and built a little bit of a relationship first, the card gets kept. When you follow up after the conference, you get a response. You're building a relationship first. But you cannot build a relationship if you don't know anything about the person you're trying to build a relationship with. Lastly, gives you an opportunity to get a feel for when to call. We all know there are times when we are susceptible to sales, and there are times where we are not susceptible to sales. And this goes for not just people that are strangers, but people who are also your friends. I had a prospect I was about to call to follow up to kind of keep a lead going, and thank God I had checked Facebook. He had had a death in the family. So not only was he not at his office, he was back in Texas dealing with that. If I had reached out, I would not have gotten any chance. And I would have revealed that I clearly was not paying attention to him on Facebook. I really wasn't following his posts. It would have just been horrible. But yet salespeople every day are immune to that. Every day they're just dialing for dollars, dialing for dollars, dialing for dollars. Use this kind of reconnaissance, use this kind of approach to time your outreach in a way that's going to let you be in front of someone at a time when they're most susceptible to a sales message or a relationship building message. Know if there's some sort of personal issue or professional issue. There's a real opportunity to know if they're having a problem. I made a comment one time about Marriott, and they weren't allowing me to get points for a night's stay because my assistant had booked it under her name, and they didn't change it to my name when I checked in. And to get points in Marriott, you have to actually have your name on the reservation and pay with your credit card. And I just kind of popped off like everybody does and said, this is ridiculous. And the VP of sales at Hyatt Hotels took that as an opportunity to engage in a conversation. Jokingly, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something lighthearted. And it had something to do with me. He had obviously, been paying attention. And, we had a little back and forth. It was fun. It was nice. This is the kind of thing that you can do if you'll take the time to learn. And it works with complete and utter strangers. We had a hotel client years ago that really, really wanted a certain influencer in Chicago. They really wanted to build a relationship. They did all of their homework. And do you know what the tweet was that finally not only got them a relationship, but he actually booked his, I think it was his 40th birthday with the hotel? He tweeted about the weather. He said something about the Chicago is great in the summer but sucks in the winter. And they just tweeted back to him like, we agree with you on the summer thing, and left it hanging. And he came back and he basically said, this, that, and the other. They kind of kept going back, and they knew a lot about him. They were able to talk to him about how he was a Harley rider. They were going to alert the valets, how they were going to, practice their Harley riding skills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they were able to have this, it's really cool in Twitter. They had this 10-minute conversation in Twitter. They had never spoken to him before. He had never tweeted the hotel. They had never tweeted him. And all of a sudden, because they were prepared, because they had done the reconnaissance, because their community manager had the data at his fingertips, when he got that little innocuous tweet, the weather tweet, he was able to build a relationship. and do it in about 10 minutes, and then that then began to give them the opportunity to build a relationship more intently over time. But the door got opened because he tweeted about the weather. And they were able and ready with their reconnaissance information to walk through that door and build a relationship. That's seduction, people. That's the way you sell today. If you continue to just send blind emails and rely strictly on marketing automation, I mean, I love it. It works well to kind of surface, what's a true lead from a non-true lead. But if you really want to increase your sales conversions, if you really want to start to build relationships that have multiple transactions attached to them versus just a single transaction, what I would tell you is this, that a post is a post, but 1,000 is a profile. Take the time to scour the internet. Take the time to scour social media profiles. Get to know and understand your prospect at a very deep personal level before you ever reach out. And if you'll do that, your close percentage will go from 20 or 30 or 40% to 70, 80, or 90%. Because one, you'll be better targeted with your outreach, and number two, you'll be selling to people who don't see you as a stranger. The book is The Invisible Sale. You can get a hold of me there. We do have time for questions. If you want a copy of the deck, you can text I want to 66866. And I thank you for your time, and I think we've left a few minutes for Q&A. If anybody has a question, I believe they'll want you to grab a mic, though, because they are videoing. Thank you.
Hello. My question is actually a pre-step to what you're talking about. How do you decide from the thousands and thousands of people out there who the 10 are that you're going to research? And once you've done all that research, how do you make initial contact without it seeming either like a more contrived cold call or a really creepy stalker thing?
Well, the first part is the process we use is we'll take a list and we'll do a triage search first. So in a triage search, you're going through and you're first trying to figure out, is somebody even profilable? There are people who actually set security settings in the world. There are people who understand how not to overshare on social, and or they're just not that active in the digital space. And so for those people, you almost can't do this. So that takes that down to begin with. What you're left with is everybody that you can profile. In terms of who you're going to reach out to, the profiling data helps you understand that. It helps you understand who's most likely, do they have certain traits, are they linked to people who are already customers, are they linked to people who can help you get introductions, etc. In terms of how do you reach out to them, honestly, that's an art. It can be taught to some extent, but it's, like I said with the hotel, a community manager was armed with the information and he took a weather tweet and turned it into a conversation. Conferences are fabulous for just having conversations. If it has to be a phone call or an email or some sort of a sales call, unfortunately you're back to sort of the same square one of cold calling of you've got to get through. But again, if you can get through and try to find a way to make that call or that happen in a non-business environment, so if you're in the same geography, if we find out that somebody's involved with a particular charity or something like that, hey, maybe you should go get involved with that charity, because you're just creating that proximity and that opportunity to establish a conversation. So a little bit of that is an art, but that's what salespeople have been trained to do all their lives. It's just applying it with a little bit more information and insight.
Hello, my name's Louis McDermott. I had a question about the transition. You figured out all this information about the person, you're having a conversation with them. How do you move into actually trying to sell them something from there?
Again, I would say it's a little bit of the art. It comes a little bit with experience. There is a difference between a good salesperson and a bad salesperson. Safe to say, it's never the first thing that you talk about. Usually what I find is best is that after you've built a rapport with someone, especially if that rapport is occurring, let's say, in an environment like a conference, at some point they're going to ask you the same question everybody always asks everybody they don't know. What do you do for a living? Or they're going to ask you what's your job. That's going to come up. And that's an awesome transition point to begin to say, oh, well, I'm a social media consultant, or we do this, or we do that. And then, they're going to ask you then a follow-up question, and you can slowly move into that. Usually you don't pull out any sales stuff until, conversation 2, 3, 4, 7. But by keeping the conversation going and asking them lots of questions, because you already know all about them, at some point, human nature is you kind of feel like, well, gosh, this person's showing a lot of interest in me. I need to show some back. What's the low-hanging fruit question I can ask that's completely innocuous and won't freak anybody out? And that tends to be, so what do you do for a living? So you really want, you want them to ask you to dance, so to speak. You want them to ask you that question. And then from there, you can begin to move into a more professional conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, great question. I'm over here.
Oh, you're like right in the light.
Right in the light. My name is Brian Shoren with Stevo Systems, and I guess my question would be is, how do you get a sales organization that has been around for a while to adapt this new philosophy, this new type of selling process?
You pray for patience, lots of patience. It depends. We do a lot of that kind of training, and sometimes you can do it through coursework type training, webinars and seminars and things of that nature. Other times, it just takes one-on-one. We'll actually apply like a coach to the account, and that coach will do one-on-one training, and you have to really commit to it. So, because what you're really asking your salespeople to do is develop a new habit, and a workshop isn't a habit. It's not going to do it. The average, I think science says it takes you about 60 to 90 days to develop a new habit, depending on how complex it is. So you really have to build a repeated learning process that they're going to be exposed to in the way that they learn. If they can learn from webinars and seminars, great. If they're that person that needs somebody over their shoulder holding their hands, then you have to suck it up and invest in that. And then you have to give them the runway. You got to know that it's going to take them a couple of months to develop. They're going to fall down and forget. You just got to keep going at it. Most of these programs that we've done with clients, we find that it's at least 9 to 12 months before they even start to see an inkling of real impact that they can trace back. But then it's like a flywheel. As that wheel spins up, it gets easier and easier to have more value and ROI, but you're in it for a long haul. It's not a quick, simple, and the older and less technical your sales force is, you can add months onto that time period.
Great, thank you.
Last question, and then I'm going to be around. I'll be out there because they have to reset this room, but feel free to just grab me. I'll hang out in the thing if anybody else has any other questions. So you, sir, have the last question.
So are you using tools to gather this information, or are you, Tom, personally and manually finding this, that page of information on those individuals?
It is a blend. We use a host of tools. There's no one tool that'll do it, unfortunately, and that's why I say you have to have the right analytical protocol. It is a very human-based. It's really sort of modern-day sleuthing. So it's a person using a set of tools and a set of analytical protocols that ultimately is building that. You don't just pump somebody's social media names through some program and it spits that out. It can be a time-consuming process.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much.